So, now that we've installed Java and IntelliJ, let's start with our first program. So, following the programming tradition, here is the Hello World program in Java. There are a couple major things here. First, there's the class main. Then, there's the main function. And then, there is the system.out.println and the comment. So, let's focus on the main function only. When the program will run, it will execute all lines in the main function between these brackets and this bracket, which are both the brackets that belong to the main function. After it finishes executing those lines inside of the brackets, the program will end. And whatever you want to do in the program, you will put in the main function. Until classes and functions are discussed, just treat the main function and class main as boilerplate code. Now, let's look at the system.out.println and the comment, which is on line 3. So, what this line does is that it prints Hello World, right? That's what the Hello World program does. All it does is it prints Hello World. So, the system.out.println part is printing Hello World, right? So, system.out.println, treat that as print. Don't worry why it's so long. That's just a print function. So in the brackets, you put whatever you want to print, which in this case is Hello World. Then, after that, we have some text following 2 forward slashes. And they're also in a different color than everything else. This is called a comment. What it does is that the compiler, which actually understands the program and gives it to the hardware for processing so that you can get your output, it doesn't read whatever is after the 2 slashes. So you can literally write whatever you want. And in this case, this prints Hello World is written just to mark the system.out.println. So, a few things to note here. As you can see in the third line, after the system.out.println, there is a semicolon. A semicolon is used to end a statement. So, in this case, it's ending the statement of printing. It's similar to the period in English. Curly brackets, like the one surrounding everything that's inside of the main function, group statements together. For example, what if I wanted to print Hello World and then also print Hi? Then, in the line after this one, I would write system.out.println in quotes, Hi. These are 2 separate statements, and the curly brackets group them together. One thing that I want to note here is that the print function is called println because after whatever you print inside of one print statement, it leaves a new line. So for example, if you want to print hello, right? So you use one of these statements, right? Except instead of, there's no world, right? And then it will automatically do a new line. So then when you want to print high, then it prints high on a different line. Also, after high, it leaves a new line, so there will be a space here. So that's just a little thing about the print function. And that's why you will always get different print statements on different lines. And whenever you print them, you'll see in the terminal, they are spaced out and are never on the same line. Arithmetic is the first thing you must have done in math class. So let's start there. Java supports integers, decimal numbers, negative numbers, and operations on them. So here's a list of all common arithmetic operators. Let's start with multiplication. The multiplication sign in Java is the star character, which is also called the asterisk. So, this equals 8. Now, let's look at division. It is the forward slash. So, negative 4 divided by 2 equals negative 2. Addition is, well, the plus sign, because it is, in fact, on the keyboard. So, negative 3 plus 2 equals negative 1. And, of course, the subtraction sign is, well, the subtraction sign, because it as well is on the keyboard. So 2 minus 4 is, well, 2 minus 4. And it equals negative 2. We will discuss the logical and assignment operators later when we need them. So now let's look at some more math operators. So let's start with exponent. Exponent is kind of like multiplication in that 2 to the power of 3 equals 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. Just like 2 times 3 equals 2 plus 2 plus 2. And 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. In Java, the caret symbol is the exponent. Now let's look at the modulus operator. So, 5 modulus 2, in Java the modulus sign is the percentage sign. What is 5 modulus 2? Well, it is 1. Can you guess what it is? Well, what the modulus does is it calculates the remainder. So, what it does is, in this case, it would do 5 divided by 2, and, well, this equals 2 with a remainder of 1, so it will output 1. When you're multiplying bigger numbers, you need to keep track of the carry. Also, in the example earlier, we had to keep track that we saw an apple in the dining room. So, how do you do the similar thing in programming? Remember, a computer has 3 parts: CPU, memory, and input-output. And memory is like a scratch pad or notebook where you can note down some information to use it later. And a variable is exactly that. A variable has 3 different parts: the type, the name, and the value. The type denotes the type of information or value you want to store. The value is the actual thing that you're storing inside of it, and the name is whatever you want to call your information. And the type depends on a value, because whatever you want to store inside of the variable will be the value, and the type of that would be the type. So, what really is the difference in type? Well, if you specify something as an integer, then it will allocate a certain amount of memory for that integer. Then, if you do a decimal, it will allocate a different amount of memory. In the example earlier, when we had to remember about that apple we saw in the living room, the apple would be the value, right? Because that's what we saw. The name would be a fruit, because that's our placeholder, and we knew it was a fruit. We just didn't know what it was. And the type would be, well, a fruit, because an apple is a fruit. Of course, in computers there isn't a fruit type, but that would what it would be in real life. Alright, so now we know about a variable, but we need to know how to assign values to a variable, or to change the value of a variable. Well, to do this, we have to use an assignment operator. And in Java, the assignment operator is the equal sign for equal. So, if you wanted x to be equal to 1, then you would write x equals 1. So, now that you know how to assign values to a variable and what a variable is, let's see how to define a variable. First, you have to do the type. Wait, let's stop here. Why do you need types in the first place? So, whenever your computer is going through your code and it sees that you define a variable, it allocates a certain amount of space for it. So, let's see that this little bit is for int num. And so, the integer has to fit inside of that. Now, let's say we have another int, right? Then we have another int over here. Now, let's say we want a little longer number that won't really fit in an int. Well, we can use a long, which is, well, a larger version than an int, and it will allocate even more space so that we can have larger numbers. But why are we allocating a certain amount? Why can't it just be whatever you need? Because at the end of the day, if you're just storing a small number, then you're going to waste it, right? But the thing is that then if you want to make it any higher, then you're going to be eating away from the variable that is right next to it. So that won't work, right? So we need to have a set amount that if you're using an integer, right, up till maybe 5 digits, 10 digits long, you can use an int and you'll be fine. But if you want an even larger number than that, then you'll have to use a long. Alright, so now let's look at the different types. So there's integer, which is, well, an integer. This is just a normal number that has no decimal points, though it still can include negatives. But still has a limit to how long the number can be. And this is where long comes in. So note here that you see int is not being set to anything, but long does have it being assigned to 102 right when you define it. When you define it, you don't have to assign a value. You can just be like, okay, this variable is a thing, I'm going to allocate some space for it, and we can use it later. So, this long is just a larger version of int, allowing you to have much, much bigger numbers. Now, let's look at double. This is just a decimal number, and it can also be negative or positive. So, now let's get to the Boolean. As you can see here, this is either true or false. So it's those kind of problems that you might find on tests, like is this true or is it false? You can use this for storing those kind of values. Like if you want the computer to calculate, hey, is this number even or odd? And it can return true or false. Now let's check out the char or character. This can store one character and one only. It can be a letter like capital A or even lowercase a. It can also be symbols like underscore and plus. And of course, it can be numbers like 1 or 2 or 10 or 3. But remember, this cannot be a number like 11, right? Because that's actually 2 characters. So, let's go through all of the lines of this slide. So, remember, each variable has a name, a type, and a value. But remember, they do not have to be specified when you define the thing. If you define the thing, like in the int's case, you're just saying that, okay, in my memory over here, I am going to allocate space for num, alright? And I'll use that later, right? So, as you can see in these, you use the equal to assign and change the value of the variable. Alright, now let's see an example of reading from a variable. This is where you have a variable, you've stored some value on it, and it's like, hey, I need that for something, so give it to me. So in this case, in the first line, you're just defining that int a is a thing, right? So in the memory, you are allocating a certain amount of space for a. And that is all that's being done. Now, let's look at the second line. In this, we are making a equal 12. So, we are putting an actual value in there. Now, in 3, we are defining a new variable, which is int b, and we are saving a little bit of space for it in the memory. And then we are recalling a. So a is correlated with the address. So in computers, instead of the address being 1 and then 2, this is the 0th part of the memory. And this would be the first. It's kind of weird, but that's just how it works. So, in this case, A is linked up with the 0th address of the memory, and then we are retrieving that data, and we're adding it to 2 over here. So in B, we are storing 12. Alright, let's talk about expressions and statements. An expression, like stated over here, is a bunch of variables and values that are joined together by some operator. In this case, there's a plus sign, and it's B and 2 that are being added together. You can also have 3 or 4 or many more values and variables. Now, a statement doesn't return anything. It just does something. But an expression, it returns something, right? So B plus 2, it returns whatever B plus 2 is, right? So in this case, the statement is making A equal B plus 2. So what it's doing is that whatever the expression outputs, it's making that A. Now you can use different brackets, like the round normal brackets, to group different expressions. For example, you want to do B plus 2, and then you want to multiply that by 5, but you want to do B plus 2 first. So you would do B plus 2, and then you would do multiplied by 5. So this is one of the quizzes for this section. What are all of the different parts of a program? Each of these arrows are pointing to a different part. And I want you to try to remember what each of these parts are. Pause the video right here. Think about what you want, what you think each of these are called and what they do, and I will give you the answer. So, here is the answer. As you can see, the public class main is the class. Everything inside of the class is inside of the program. Then in public static void main, it's the main function. This is where the program starts. Next, we have the print. All this does, it's print whatever is inside of the brackets. Then we have a comment. After the 2 forward slashes, you can write whatever you want. This does absolutely nothing. So here is the variable practice. Remember to mind your semicolons and the variable types. Pause it here, and after a few seconds, I will give you the answer. So, first we're defining int A, make it equal to 5, int B, and make sure for x to make it a double.